is Chanel Smith, and today I will be discussing my aging presentation. For my aging presentation, I covered my subject or my client, which was Pauline Smith. Her relation to me is my grandmother, so it was relatively easy to conduct my interview and ask the questions. I had a lot of background, obviously, a lot of background information because that is my grandma. So to begin with just some standard introductory information about her. She is an African American woman. She was born in Georgetown, Guyana, so she is an immigrant. She's been in the United States since the 1990s, and she originally moved to New Jersey, and she still resides there now. She had a lot of different things going on, and it caused her to want to have a better life and move to America. But while she was in her home country of Guyana, she attended elementary, middle school, and high school there. And then she went into her young adult life there as well. So a good portion of her life was in Guyana. So she came to America in her 30s, but before that happened, I'm going to discuss a little bit about her children, her marriage, and just a little bit about her familial background to kind of give basis for the rest of the interview. So she grew up in a rather large family. Her parents had 9 kids, and they lived in what many would describe as a rural setting or a country setting. They tended to animals like cows and chickens, almost like a farm situation. And since it was so many of them, they had different duties and different chores. Like I said, she had a really big family, 9 kids altogether. So they had certain roles they had to play. And I mentioned this in my paper. It was a structure that we commonly know about where men and boys did a lot of yard work, or they did what many would describe as the harder work, and the women would do the housework and cook and watch children. So even at a younger age, my client, she had to do a lot of those kind of stereotypical standard chores that many would assign to a women's role or to a girl's role. But as she grew up, she was expected to help take care of the family and help take care of the house. And then eventually, as she moved on towards her life into her teen years and into her young adulthood, she began working officially, and she originally worked as a security guard, and that was a common job in their place of living. So she did that, and then she eventually fell in love and got married, and she was married to Lennox Smith, and they began to start a family. In that case, they had 3 kids: Samantha, Sion, and Shirlene. And this was all still while they lived in Guyana, so they hadn't migrated to the U.S. yet. So she had 3 kids, and then throughout that, she realized that for their family, they wanted a better livelihood, and they moved to America. So when they moved to America, she began training, and she obtained certifications as a certified nursing assistant and also as a certified surgical tech. And she worked in a hospital setting from her young adulthood up until she retired at 64, 60, 62 or 60, 62 through 64, I believe. And then throughout her years working, her and her husband both worked, and they raised their kids, and a lot of the familial the traits and the values that were passed out from her parents, she passed those down to her kids as well. So a lot of values about hard work and um, a lot of role playing and what the kids are allowed to do. In addition to her 3 biological kids, she adopted some of her nieces and nephews after their mother passed away. So in all, it was about 7 or 8 of them when they moved to America. So it kind of echoed the same sentiments that she had growing up. Her kids had that same type of family setting where it was a large family and everybody had assigned responsibilities. So throughout her aging and throughout her growing up in adulthood, there was a type of consistency that one could say that was kind of set as a standard from since she was young. So she had three kids. In addition, she had her nieces and nephews. She did work for a very, very long time. She didn't take any breaks in working. She believed in staying devoted and just staying busy. So that was one thing that is kind of like a pattern throughout her life was that sense of staying busy and sense of self and sense of identity and having a work ethic. So after discussing her kids, of course, she had nine grandkids, myself included. Um, and I would say a lot of those traits still trickle down to our generation. The value of hard work, and even though education was very limited for her, she pushes that on her grandchildren, for us to value our education so we could advance in life because that was her reasoning for moving to America. So a lot of similar traits that we can see. She, while throughout the interview and just basic knowledge that I have because that is my grandmother, I can say that she has a lot of values that kind of echo some larger values within our society. So just valuing family, valuing hard work, kind of like the American dream, and you work your way up the ladder. That was a lot of her. That was incorporated, and you can see it a lot in her livelihood. Um, Now, going into a little bit into the Erickson's model, I do want to point out grief because I know that's one of the stages kind of discussed. And with that, her husband, my grandfather, passed away last year, and so that's been, I would say, from knowing her since I was born, that's one area where grief has taken a lot of toll on her life, and I can actually see it and visualize it and talk to her about it, and I can see the difference in how she was before and how she is now, and kind of the switch or the transition over from being with someone for so long to that person's not there no more. And as we know, that's a part of aging, and that's a part of the elderly lifestyle, grief and health and different things that on a sadder note kind of start going into we start thinking about in life as we get older. So I will say that's a sad part, but to mention the integrity versus despair, I still think she shows a lot of integrity in her life, in her values, and how she's living and how she's lived. And one thing that she preaches and she stated throughout the interviews and throughout life in general was it's not necessarily having any regrets because she's made a lot of good decisions, especially moving her family to America. I know that was one main one that was highlighted. So I think my client, when looking at Erickson's model, I think integrity kind of takes a higher standard than the despair does. Of course, there's sad moments, especially as we get older and we reach that age limit, 65 and over, and there's different obstacles that come into play. But integrity for her still reigns above the despair, even when comparing and contrasting the two. And there's been different things in her life, health included, such as she's had knee issues, and of course that's a common issue in health with the elderly as they grow older. Biologically, our bodies become worn down from all the work we've been doing, and I think that goes hand in hand with the amount of work she's had to put into her life. So I think that just highlights some of the areas where the Erickson's model comes into play, especially with losing a loved one and how that takes a toll on the mental and even physical, emotional aspect of aging, and also the integrity part, how she still values hard work and how she still teaches it to her family, and it kind of trickles down throughout their generation. So I think that just highlights a little bit about my subject and a little bit what I talk about in the paper, and it just shows how you can view aging through one individual and see some common characteristics and sentiments about what we know about aging and what research we have about aging and how it affects individuals as they go on through different stages of their lives, from young adulthood to from childhood to young adulthood to the middle age area, and then moving up onto the elderly area. We see how aging plays a part in our daily lifestyles by viewing just one person. And that's just a little bit about my paper and my client that I chose to interview. And I hope that explains a little bit about what I wrote about. Thank you.